Thank you very much for coming out. Is the sound working? Got it? The sound working? It's not on? Is somebody going to deal with this? Look at that moon. It's a new moon. Can you hear now? Can't hear? Bring it closer. Can you hear now? No, that doesn't do any good. Shall we sing This Land Is Your Land again until they get the sound working? Highway, this land was made for you and me.
The lady in the harbor, in the city in which I live, holds a wonderful torch. We will not let this evil order extinguish that great torch.
I'll do the real people now.
Are they here? Where are they?
They couldn't find the real people. Tucker Carlson is a real person.
I think so.
He hosts a show at 9 p.m. Eastern.
That's right. Where were you?
Nancy
Pelosi was looking for you, Tucker.
You could have been
a real person?
Yeah.
I was at work,
yeah,
like real people.
Right. Well, so Tucker, when your mic goes out, do you sing a folk song?
You know, we do have music in the studio, though, because I believe in music. No, because it's not 1965 again.
That's
I mean,
right.
These are real issues, adult issues, that people ought to be discussing in detail. And if you disagree, explain why.
Sure.
But instead, you know, these are morons and demagogues. Here's the problem, though. The pressure, the social pressure in the country is rising to a level that is unhealthy. I mean, you want to challenge the system. You don't want to break the system. And you do sort of hope that both sides decelerate, because things are getting to a level of hysteria that is actually not healthy.
Well, Tucker, you're absolutely right. Whoever they rented that sound system from, I'm hoping they're getting a refund today. After that video was televised, Donald Trump this morning got out his Twitter machine and wrote this: Nancy Pelosi, and here's a new name, Fake Tears Chuck Schumer, held a rally at the steps of the Supreme Court, and mic did not work. A mess, just like the Democratic Party. And then Nancy Pelosi's spokesperson responded.
The mic briefly didn't work, but this thin-skinned president clearly heard the voices of the more than 250 members of Congress and thousands of others who gathered outside the Supreme Court last night. The president's immoral executive order is clearly unconstitutional, no matter how many times he tweets or how many administration officials he fires. Tucker?
Yeah. I mean, it's neither immoral nor unconstitutional. I think you can make a solid and defendable case for, you know, why he's acting in the best interest of the country. But there's another component to this, which is you have to explain things to people, and Twitter is not the way to do that. You know, a speech is the way to do that. Articulate spokesmen are the way to do that. You know, if you make the case slowly and calmly, I think you win over a large majority of the country, because fundamentally the U.S. does have a right to control who comes here and to act in its own interest, and the president has a responsibility to protect the population of the country. But if things get so crazy, and if people start saying things that are so irresponsible, it drowns out those points. And so you really need to calm people a little bit. That's part of the job. And so while I am totally in favor of the themes behind this, because I think they're right and I think they help America, I also think the administration has an obligation to speak in a way that people can hear.
Right, and I think we're going to see that when they get a Secretary of State and Attorney General, like every other administration. They're going to get people in the process. And look, it wasn't executed well. It wasn't communicated well. It was signed and implemented in a matter of time. People started their weekend and all hell broke loose. But I assume when they get people in place, it'll be better. And when the Obama people are moved out, they'll have more loyalists amongst them. Meanwhile, let's talk about what's going on with the refugees. Now, all of a sudden, Donald Trump is getting, now it's his problem that there are refugees in Syria that want to come here. We all knew that President Obama was the one responsible for this crisis that is flooding Europe, changing Sweden, and we're trying to prevent it from happening here.
It's destroying a lot of Western Europe and Scandinavia, as you know. And so the core question is, how do you prevent that from happening here? I mean, for 50 years, there's been this experiment going on across the ocean with trying to assimilate large groups of people from the Middle East, and I don't think anyone would argue that it works. And by the way, it's produced a massive political backlash. Marine Le Pen is in first place in polling as of this morning in the French election. That's a response to a terrible and destabilizing immigration policy practiced in France. So, like, nobody wants that. What I'm so struck by is if you press the opponents of the president's executive orders and ask, well, why exactly are you against this? And if you keep pressing, you get to this point. America is immoral. It has an immoral history, and therefore it has a moral obligation to let in everyone from around the world. Well, the truth is, the United States has let in more people voluntarily than any country in the history of the world. We have more foreign-born people here, again, voluntarily than any country on the planet. The U.S. has done a lot, and yet somehow people under 30, I think, haven't learned that. They've learned only of the sad parts of American history, and so this is almost punishment for America's sins. That's kind of a grotesque argument, I think.
No kidding.
Tucker, you had a guy on your show last night, Mark Hetfeld, who said, if we don't bring these refugees in and don't allow them here into our country, there will be another Holocaust. Listen.
You're saying that the Holocaust happened because of American immigration policy?
No. I'm not saying that at all. Okay. I'm not saying that.
Because hundreds of thousands of Americans died fighting the Nazis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what did happen is America turned its back on refugees during that period, just like we're turning our back on refugees right now. We're not responsible for the crisis in Syria, but we do have some responsibility to protect the refugees who are fleeing for their lives.
Tucker, what's your response?
Well, I mean, you know, that is partly true but misleading. I mean, so the United States did turn away people fleeing Europe, okay, in some number, but it also defeated the Nazis, you know, at great expense. So millions of Americans traveled across the ocean to a country not theirs, to a war that wasn't fundamentally theirs, and hundreds of thousands died, and countless more were injured and had their lives interrupted for the sake of ending fascism. And so that's something that we ought to be proud of, but to flip it around, and I think most Americans are proud of it, and to say because America made a mistake 70 years ago, we have an obligation to bring in Syrian refugees against our own interests, I mean, is insane. And actually, it's an insult to all of those Americans who died doing the right thing, I think.
Sure. Of course, we started the conversation talking a little bit about the immigration pause that the president has installed for the next 87 days or so. Of course, currently the top law officer of the country, aside from the president, is the acting attorney general. Sally Yates came out very publicly yesterday and said, look, I don't think this thing is legal. She was a holdover from the Obama administration. It looks like she was a partisan as well. But now the mainstream media has hopped on this, Tucker, and is calling this a Monday night massacre. Now, I think we're both old enough to remember the Saturday night massacre, and this isn't anything like it.
Well, it's different on a bunch of different levels because at its core, there's not a legal debate here. I mean, Sally Yates, who, by the way, was kept on by the Trump administration, and I think it's worth asking why.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, clearly, from their perspective. But there's not a legal debate, again, at the center of this. So if you read what Sally Yates said, the acting attorney general, she said basically this is wrong, I don't agree with it, it's immoral, it's bad, and therefore I'm not going to defend it. It's not really, and you know, that's fine that she has that view, but that's not really her job. Her job is to interpret the law against the Constitution, legal requirements, and evaluate whether, you know, an order like this is legal. And she didn't really do that. And so she's acting outside of her job description. So I think it's
rogue.
Well, a little bit. I mean, she's allowed to have that opinion. But as acting attorney general, she should evaluate whether it's legal or not. And I don't see that she really did that.
And, of course, that had to change your show. No one thinks about when these firings happen how it changes your show.
Like,
you have
what
to
effect is it going to have on cable news? No,
it's
that's a fair question.
Well, how does it affect Tucker? And just overall, lately you've been saying that Ainsley is your favorite. Has anything changed on here on Fox and Friends?
You know, a lot changes in this world, Brian, but some facts are immutable. They're carved in stone, and Ainsley being my favorite is one of them.
Well,
it's up there with gravity within the sunlight.
They worked together on the weekends for many, many years. I completely understand.
When they were kids.
All right. Tucker, thank you. We'll be watching
Tucker,
tonight.
great to see you.
Thanks, guys.